Welcome. I'm Doug Sesserman, privileged to serve as the CEO of American Associates Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. We are privileged to raise awareness and ultimately resources for one of the most exciting universities in the world and one of the most important institutions to the future of Israel. Today, we have a great panel talking about outer space and Ben-Gurion University and learning how this powerhouse university in the middle of the Israeli desert is in collaboration with NASA, is sending its second spacecraft to the moon, and is working with the UN on climate change and disaster relief across the world. We have an incredible panel: Dan Blumberg, Kfir Damari, and Shimrit Maman. Before we start, I just want to thank those behind the scene: Melody Mokhtarian, our Director of Events and Experiences, for all her work; Dana Ben-Yamin, who works in Israel to help us; Kara Bortman, our digital marketing person. We're live on Facebook; and of course, Ronnie Strongen, our Chief Marketing Officer. It's noon Eastern. I'm speaking to you from my virtual office in New York City, and our guests are in Israel. So it's hashtag Webinar Wednesdays. Let's get started. So Dan Blumberg, we're going to start with you. Just to remind the audience the way this format works, and for those of you who are familiar, you've joined us again, just click on the Q&A function if you have a question during the speakers, and I'll do my best to give those questions to our panelists. And each speaker will talk for about 10 minutes, then at the end of the program, we'll have Q&A from everybody. So Danny, welcome. Professor Dan Blumberg is the Simon Family Chair in Remote Sensing. He is also the former Vice President of Research for Ben-Gurion University and the current Vice President for Regional Development and Industrial Development at BGU. He's also the Director of BGU's Homeland Security Institute. Dan has led the development of the Israeli space scene, really since the beginning. Professor Blumberg recently led the development and successful launch of Israel's first academic nanosatellite we call BGU-SAT. A member of the International Academy of Astronautics, Professor Blumberg founded the Earth and Planetary Image Facility at BGU, an affiliate of NASA's Regional Planetary Image Facilities Network. Professor Blumberg did his first degree at Tel Aviv University, but received his master's and his PhD from BGU and his PhD from Arizona State University. Danny, welcome.
Thanks, Doug.
Please share with us some of your thoughts and background.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Doug. What a pleasure to be with you. You know, with all of the hardships of COVID, this is one of the things that has really become easy, the ability to be sitting in Beersheba and talking to all our friends across the ocean in the United States at various places, and to be sitting here together with two of my really good colleagues, Shimrit Maman, who's been working together with me, running the lab with me for quite a long time. Shimrit, I'm not even going to say how long, but it seems like one day. We've enjoyed every moment. And Kfir, who's also a graduate, and you're going to present Kfir later on, who's really an entrepreneur and started some amazing things. Thanks for all the compliments you gave me at the beginning. One thing I want to correct: I didn't start the Israeli space program. I've been involved in the Israeli space program. I don't want to take that away from Chaim Eshed and some other very precious friends and colleagues of ours. So,
I stand corrected, thank you.
That's fine. So thanks a lot. What I'd like to do in the next 5 minutes is set the platform for this discussion this evening, tell you a little bit about the Israeli space program, what we're doing at BGU and where BGU is involved in space research. I won't tell you everything that's going on because for that we'd need a much longer webinar. And then I'll hand it over to my friends over here, to my colleagues, to give the follow-up on that. I'm going to use a few slides as we start off. And I want to mention some very good friends, some dear colleagues of ours, friends of ours, family of ours. Ilan Ramon, who grew up in Beersheba, was perished in the space shuttle disaster 18 years ago. Rona Ramon, his wife, was a very good personal friend of ours, visited us often, and we had annual events where she took part in it. And Asaf Ramon, their son, perished while he was in the Air Force, in the Israeli Air Force, and is a graduate of Ben-Gurion University. And the disaster happened exactly this week, 18 years ago. So we try to dedicate events during this week to their memory. And they really are dear friends that we try to remember. So I'll give you a little glimpse as to what we do at BGU. Most of what I do and Shimrit does is remote sensing. Phil will talk about traveling into outer space. We lead the Earth and Planetary Image Facility at BGU, which is actually a NASA affiliate of the regional planetary image facilities, one of 17 facilities across the world, 12 of which are in the United States and 5 outside the United States. In this picture over here, you can actually see students of ours on the roof of the building setting up a receiving station for our own little satellite, which I'll mention later on. So first of all, let's start off with the Israeli space program. There are only 10 countries worldwide capable of building and launching a satellite, as we say, from womb to tomb. And of those 10, Israel is one of those 10, and obviously the smallest one of the 10. So it's really an achievement, but it's actually also a big challenge, not only building cheaper and lighter satellites, but we're the only country in the world that launches to the west. Obviously, because the day we launch to the east, some bad things are probably going to happen. So we don't launch to the east, we launch to the west, which puts a lot of constraints on our satellites and requires them to be much, much smaller because we lose 30% of the energy immediately at the launch. Yet, Israel has launched successfully more than a dozen satellites. Several of them are still in space, working now. And actually, you can see in this picture on the left, the launch of one of the OFEC satellites, which is a military satellite from the launch pad in the center of Israel. So we've had several launches. The first one was in 1988, which actually provides us independence in space and the ability to look worldwide at our neighbors, obviously, but not only also looking at climate change, geologic changes, monitoring the environment. And over here, you can see on the left, a picture of the Israeli launch vehicle, the Shavit rocket, just before launching one of the OFEC satellites. You can see in the middle, the OFEC 1 satellite. Now, the whole satellite and most Israeli satellites weigh only 300 kilograms. Most satellites in the world weigh much more than a ton. And on the right, you can see it's actually an artist's view of the launch of another OFEC satellite. So we've been in space since 1988, and we've launched several satellites. BGU has been involved in several Israeli missions, including Venus, which is actually not to Venus. It's a vegetation monitoring satellite together with the French Space Agency, and all of the scientific payload and scientific missions are led by Ben-Gurion University, and it allows us to see, for example, changes in vegetation, changes in agriculture, stress imposed on farms, and allows us then to respond to that. BGU-SAT, as you mentioned earlier, which is the little satellite in the middle, is the size of a little milk box. We built it together with the IAI, the Israel Aerospace Industry, and it was launched a little over 3 years ago. And I'll tell you a small secret. When we launched it from India, actually not from Israel, I said to Shimrit, it was about 5 in the morning, I said to her, you know what, if this lasts 1 month in space, we can open a bottle of champagne. Well, lo and behold, 3.5 years later, it's still in space, still taking pictures, images that we can still use and our students are still analyzing. The Bereshit program, which Kfir will talk about much more extensively later on, is an Israeli mission, a very unique mission. And I won't take away from Kfir's introduction, but it is very unique and it was launched to the moon. BGU was involved in two aspects. One, the magnetometer on that spacecraft was actually, a lot of the work was done at BGU by one of our students who's associated with our lab, Dr. Asaf Gross, who now has his PhD, and he still works at BGU. And actually the bus received its legacy and proof from BGU set. Bereshit 2, Bereshit 2 is the new mission, which we're also affiliated with. And recently we signed an agreement of cooperation, and we're going to open our labs to the people of Bereshit and collaborate with them. And the last mission, Musar, was an intended mission to Venus. Unlike the first one, which is called Venus, this one is to Venus and included a synthetic aperture radar antenna capable of looking through clouds day and night and looking at the surface of Venus. And we still hope to be launching it one day. So I'll just give you two pictures to show what are the things that we can look at. So we live in the desert. And one of the amazing things that tells us the story of climate change in the desert is actually sand dunes and how they move. And you can see over here two pictures, not from Earth, pictures that we've been working on, actually from Mars, of sand dunes on Mars. But we also look at pictures of sand dunes on Earth. On the picture on the left, you can see
Danny, these are pictures from BGU sat of
No,
Mars.
no, these are different pictures from a NASA mission, but I'm just trying to give you a feeling of the type of pictures that we can use to understand climate, to understand wind on Earth and on Mars and on Venus. And I think that these are pretty pictures also, so I really like showing them. But these are pictures of dunes, and they're very similar to the types of pictures that we use to look at Earth and understand climate change on Earth and what happens in many areas on the face of this planet. Actually, on the picture on the left, we can see these dark slope streaks, which one of our students is working on at the moment, trying to understand what actually created them. We can also look at surface changes and how the globe changes. And you can see over here a picture of an island in the South Pacific in 2016. And 1 year later, that island actually grew, and it's still growing nowadays. And how the plates move, and we can look at that and monitor that. Well, obviously, this also has applied capabilities. And we can look, as I said earlier, at farms and understand farming, improve farming, but we can also use it for other purposes. And this over here is a high resolution synthetic aperture radar image. And Israel is one of the only countries in the world involved in synthetic aperture radar. I'm not allowed to show you any Israeli images over here, so I'm using an American image of an airstrip. And you can see over here the aircraft, by the way, through clouds from a distance of about 400 miles above Earth. And we can even see the elements on these spacecrafts. You can see where, on these airplanes, where they parked. We can see what's next to the building, and we can even see some of the elements in the wings over here. So those are a few pictures, just trying to share with you some of the things we do. But we're trying to take that to the bigger picture also. And we've been looking in the past years at how climate changes and understanding the connection between surface morphologies as we see them from space and wind direction, for example, or rainfall, and trying to use that to predict how this planet might change in the future. Shimrit will tell you also about some of the work that we've been doing on disaster relief and disaster mitigation, work that we're doing together with the United Nations. And Fear will tell you what we hope to be doing on the moon. and I'll hand this back over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Your talk was so interesting, and it may be one of the first times during a webinar that we got no questions from the audience because they were just paying attention to what you were saying. Also, I just want to compliment the audience. Our participant number is growing as we've been live on Facebook. So welcome to the over 100 people that have joined us today. One quick note, just if you look at the Dan Blumberg's virtual background, he's in front of or in the middle of what we call the DNA bridge. It's the bridge that crosses the train tracks from the university to the Advanced Technologies Park. We think of that as bringing the DNA from academia into industry. And today we're talking about taking that DNA from academia into outer space. So with that, let's switch to Kfir Damari, who's one of our alums that we're very proud of. Kfir is the co-founder and vice president of marketing and community relations for SpaceIL, which is a nonprofit, if you haven't heard of it, working to plant Israel's flag on the moon. He's also the co-founder of the Tabuki and Metapacket information security companies. He's an entrepreneur, as I mentioned, an engineer, researcher, lecturer, and communications and information security expert. He served as an officer in the elite technology unit of the IDF's Intelligence Corps, specializing in cyber technologies. He's fully educated at Ben-Gurion University, receiving his first degree as bachelor's, as well as his master's in science in communication system engineering. Welcome, Kfir. So tell us about SpaceIL, your vision for the company, and then let's get into Bereshit 2, which is the second spacecraft from Israel to be going to the moon. Kfir.
Thank you. First of all, I will say thank you. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with you all. And I would like to share the story. I will actually tell you that the story of SpaceIL started just when I was about to finish my master's degree in Ben-Gurion University. And when a friend of mine called Yariv wrote on his Facebook wall, who wants to go to the moon? And he was referring the Google Lunar X Prize competition, an international competition to land the first private spacecraft on the moon. Immediately when I saw that, I told him, if you're serious, I'm in. And basically how we started, the next sentence, by the way, was that we just did a course, in my bachelor degree about how to design a control for a satellite. So I told him I have some expertise. I didn't know that I still have a lot to learn, but I think that this is the moment when we started. We were planning to build a really, really small spacecraft. The first design was basically just like BGU sat based on a CubeSat design. But when the project evolved, we realized it's not possible. And instead of a really small bottle size design that weighed 5 kilos, eventually we got like a big table for the whole family that weighed 585 kilo. So the spacecraft became bigger as the project progressed. But I will tell you, jumping now to the end, that there are the only team in the competition that decided that reached to the point that we actually launched the spacecraft, and we've reached the moon. We launched it on February 22 and reached the moon around a month and a half later on April 4th. That was the lunar capture. A week later, we tried to land on the moon. We did succeed in landing, but instead of a soft landing, we got a hard landing or crash landing. So we got to the moon, not as expected. But definitely got there. I will tell you that through the process, eventually the project, the first estimation was $8 million. Eventually the full budget was $100 million. Most of it we actually got from donations. Again, we are a nonprofit. And so most of it came from private donations of private individuals. I
remember when Bereshit 1 crashed, and some people were disappointed, but you learn from your mistakes as an entrepreneur, and now you're at Bereshit 2.
Yes, definitely. I will say something else. First of all, it's not just the three of us, the three founders. Beside the donors that I mentioned, we also had like a core team of 400 people that was working on the mission. There was, as Dan mentioned, also the magnetometer that collected information on the magnetic field of the moon while the spacecraft was descending, and it's being analyzed here on Earth. But I think that before we'll move to Bereshit 2, there's something that is really important to talk about still. And that's the fact that the mission was to get to the moon, but the vision was much bigger than that. And the vision was to inspire the next generation of scientists and engineers. And beside, the people that were working on the engineering, we also had hundreds of volunteers that went into classrooms, and together with, different educational partners that we had, we've met around 2 million children, half of them in Israel. The other half, by the way, is in the States, together with our partner, the I Center. And it was really amazing to see how much this story of that spacecraft can inspire kids to go and study science and technology. That's one, but also to make them realize that they should dream big and follow their dreams. And I would also say that something that we didn't plan, we didn't think about, but to kids that come from the US, this story actually was able to connect kids that sometimes didn't feel so connected to Israel, but through the story, through the technology, through the engineering and the science, they were able to connect. And this is something amazing that I think happened. Of course, also should mention that with this, NASA helped us a lot. And with NASA support, we could actually get some amazing picture during the landing. So that's also important. Maybe I'll show you in the back some of the cool pictures we got. So this is one
This
picture.
is from Bereshit 1?
Yes. This is a picture from Bereshit 1 of the moon from close by. This is one of our famous pictures. You can see the Israeli flag. It's hard maybe to see, but it's written here, Am Yisrael Chai, and small country, big dreams. This is it's not the last, it's almost the last picture that we were able to receive. We got amazing picture. We were able to inspire many kids. And as you said, we were looking to see what will be the next mission. So before I forget, just to show you how Bereshit 1 looked in the past, but now we can start maybe talk about the next mission. And the next mission, Bereshit 2, is something that we had to think about, because we realized that we don't want to do the same mission. It's not just about copy paste of the same mission and changing the last 5 minutes. This is not what we wanted. The DNA of SpaceIL is to do something that is considered impossible. And we were looking really, really hard to understand what should be that thing. And in the beginning of 2020, we hired a new CEO, Shimon Sarid. He comes with a lot of expertise from the Air Force and then in Elbit. And we were working together, and actually I'll give him the credit for thinking about this idea. And what we decided is we are going back to the moon, but we're going to do that not just with one spacecraft, but with 3 spacecrafts. 2 of them are going to be landers that are going to land in 2 different places on the moon. And also we'll have an orbiter that will deploy those 2 landers, and then will continue orbiting around the moon. Now, you need to realize that, first of all, this concept...
The two landers and the orbiter are all part of what you call Bereshit 2?
Exactly. Now, this concept of 2 landers in 1 mission is something that was never done before, okay? Something unique. And another thing that is important to realize on Bereshit 2 is the fact that the orbiter that will keep orbiting the moon will stay there for at least 3 years. And we are aiming that both students in the university, but also high school students from many countries around the world will be able to connect to this orbiter and be part of the scientific mission. And as Dan said, we're really happy also, as someone who studied in Ben-Gurion, we're really happy that BGU joined, and Dan is actually joining our scientific advisory board to really help us define what should be those sensors and what should be those experiments that kids and students will be able to take part in.
Awesome. Well, just to fill the audience in a little bit on the basic timing for your project.
So basically, we started in the beginning of 2020 on working on this project. On just a month ago, we announced officially what we're planning to do together with the Israeli president. And this is the first time we told what's going to be the mission for Bereshit 2. Right now, we are in design phases. We're starting what is called the preliminary design review, the PDR, which is the basic sketches of the spacecraft. We'll move to the detailed design later, and we're planning to then go to assembly and to launch it somewhere in the first half of 2024.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Unfortunately,
It's not that far away in space-time.
It's not so far away, totally. Unfortunately, although Dan mentioned that we're able to launch things from Israel, the spacecraft will have to be launched from somewhere else. In the last time we launched from Florida together with SpaceX. It might be the same thing, but we'll probably negotiate, but I'm pretty sure that they will give us the best price.
All right, well, we can't wait to see that. Let me just close with two questions. One,
yes.
That's like the greatest t-shirt ever. Where can I get one?
So we have it, this is first of all for our volunteers, but we have also an online. You're welcome. But we also have an online store in the website. So, everyone who wants is welcome.
Did you want to give the URL for your website?
Yes, the URL is SpaceIL.com. We launched a new website not so long ago. Also in Arabic, both for the Arabic Israelis, but also because, as I said, we're going to create international partnerships, and we're really hoping to be able to connect Israel with other countries, including Arabic countries, in the next mission. So we're working hard on that. We have right now 7 countries that are interested in being part of Bereshit 2.
Are you in any dialogue right now with the United Arab Emirates?
So this was actually officially announced that, yes, they are one of those 7 countries. Even in the first negotiations, the first conversation, the story of Bereshit was mentioned. They have amazing capabilities. They have the mission to Mars, and we really hope that we'll be able to join forces with Bereshit 2. But also, you need to think about other countries, like countries in Africa. They don't have any space capabilities, but maybe through the mission, through Bereshit 2 mission, kids there will be able to be part of a real scientific mission in deep space. This is an opportunity for them that, there isn't any other opportunity to do such a thing.
I love it. Howard Marcus, who's Howard and Lottie and their daughter Ellen, gave the amazing transformative gift for the main campus, the largest gift ever to the state of Israel. And Howard believed that you could achieve space through water, or peace through water. Now we know that we can achieve peace through outer space exploration. So thank you very much. I just want to have you close with one comment, which is the name of Bereshit. So tell us about how you came up with the name, because we're talking about a biblical name. The Bereshit is the first chapter in the book of Genesis, in the beginning. So tell us a little bit of how you chose the name.
So, to give credit to the people who actually did that, it's not us. We had all kind of names. We were thinking about Levana and Golda and all kind of names. But we did an online campaign in the Israeli website Ynet, and showed all the names we had in mind. And then someone from the net said the word, the name Bereshit, and then it got thousands of votes, more than anything else. I think it's an amazing name. It also connects us, to the Bible and the past, but it also, the meaning is, besides just Genesis, is in the beginning. And, we were aiming that the Bereshit 1 will be the first Israeli spacecraft in deep space, but not the last one. We were actually planning that the kids that got inspired from the mission will build future spacecrafts, but eventually we are building the second one, but the third and fourth and fifth probably will be to the kids that actually got inspired from this mission.
All right, well, you're inspiring our audience, because we're already getting questions and comments, one from Davi Souza about, can Can international students apply for internships and master's degrees to work on space-related topics? And Dan Blumberg is going to answer that. Mike Diamond's asking how he can become a BGU astronaut. Ernie Simon earlier, who was the generous benefactor behind the Simon Family Chair for remote sensing, asked that after you're done with Beresheet, can your next operation set up a regional office for the American Associates of Ben-Gurion University on the moon? So
we can
have
also do it with Beresheet too, you know.
Love it, love it. Okay, thank you very much, Kfir. We're going to move on to Shimrit.
Hey, good evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Shimrit, thank you for joining us. So we're speaking now to Dr. Shimrit Maman. She's a research associate at Ben-Gurion University of the Negev's Homeland Security Research Institute and the director of the Earth and Planetary Image Facility. Her research involves the application of satellite technologies to environmental challenges and climate change. An integral part of her research is leading BGU SAT that we talked about before, Israel's first nano satellite. She also heads the Israeli Regional Support Office for the United Nations Platform for Space-Based Information for Disaster Management and Emergency Response. And for those who didn't follow what I just said, the acronym is UN SPIDER. Shimrit was born in Israel and received her bachelor's degree, her PhD, and her master's, of course, from Ben-Gurion University. Shimrit, tell us about this project with the UN.
Okay, so thank you so much for having me. And I will say that we're very honored to make this lecture in honor of Ilan, Rona, and Asaf, the Ramon family. And what we're doing with the United Nations is basically we're a regional support office, the first in Israel, the 25th in the world. And we're developing algorithms using remote sensing analysis of different applications from rapid response to rehabilitation for the long term after such a disaster. So it could either be a tsunami or an earthquake or landslides or any kind of disaster that you could just think of. And we're using the satellite technology in our imagery, all available images, in order to respond immediately and also on the long term.
It's incredible. Tell us how this came about. I mean, it's hard for us to understand. I mean, now we're learning about BGU's competency and Israel's competency in space, but also emanating from the university. But how did this relationship with the UN even begin?
Well, actually, the relationship with the United Nations started off because I'm also on the committee of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, representing Israel. And we have several projects that are international and getting to know each other better and enhancing our visibility, both of Ben-Gurion's and of Israel's Israeli Space Agency in the activity of United Nations. We got to understand that the Earth and Planetary Image Facility could serve much more people than just the local students in Israel and the international research collaborations we have. We could actually apply our research to useful pieces from outer space to benefit worldwide. And for that, we are currently serving as experts on such advisory missions to different countries in the world. We provide training for developing countries. We also had training in South Korea a year and a half ago. And basically, one of the things that I like most about our work is that we could use space to help Earth, not as opposed to fear that he's aiming for the moon. And I love what he's doing, and I'm so inspired by his work. But we're doing the opposite thing. We're bringing space down to Earth.
I love that. So help us on, we talked about this a little bit, but just tell us a little bit about why you're so fascinated with the field of remote sensing and what that is in a kind of lay person's language. What does remote sensing mean?
Well, remote sensing is basically the science and art of acquisition of information of an object without coming in physical contact. So I could gather a lot of information. And basically, when we think about space exploration and we think about the pictures that Danny showed a minute ago from Mars, that's remote sensing. We're gathering a lot of information without physical contact. So we have these satellites over us taking pictures, which are called images, all the time, gathering this information that could be later on analyzed for different applications. So Danny was showing examples of geomorphology on Mars and how we could use Mars and the sand dunes on Mars as different indicators, for example, for climate. Because apart from the rovers that we have on Mars, we don't have any weather stations. So, but we do know what the weather and the climate is on Mars. And that's because of the indirect measurements that we could apply from these remote sensing satellites.
That was an excellent answer. Thank you so much. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with the audience, or else we'll bring back the rest of the panelists?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so thank you, Shimrit. So now we'll bring back Fear and also Danny Blumberg. And we'll use the last few minutes to answer questions from the audience. First of all, the three of you, this was a fantastic panel. Thank you so much for joining us. It's both incredibly interesting and inspiring, the work the BGU is doing in outer space. So just quickly to the audience, if you'd like to ask a question, click on your Q&A function. You can ask a question of all the panelists or any one of them in particular. But while we're waiting for those questions to build, Dan, Kfir, Shimrit, do you have questions of each other?
Oh, we're going to do that later on. Trust me, on a bottle of beer, over a bottle of beer. But in the meanwhile, maybe, Doug, I'll say a few words because there were questions coming up. Some of them I was answering online.
Yeah.
But I want to start off by someone asked about Ilan, Asaf, and Rona Maman.
Yeah.
So if that was not known, Ilan was the first Israeli astronaut, perished in the disaster of the Space Shuttle 2003. He was a combat pilot, was one of the pilots to fly to Iraq and attack the nuclear facility in Iraq. He was the youngest one. Asaf was his son, was a combat pilot also, killed while in the Air Force, and Rona unfortunately passed away a few years ago, and they're dear friends of ours. So I wanted to make that clear as we move along.
Thank you.
Okay.
So let me just check. We're getting a question.
And to Mike Diamond that wants to fly to be an astronaut, we're getting the spacesuit ready for you.
Yeah, so we also got a comment from Terry Alpert, who's one of our new board members. She just wants to be a fly on the wall when you all grab beer after this webinar.
We can do another webinar in the bar with the beer. So
sounds very good. And have enough to drink, and I'll pull that t-shirt off your body. And then we're getting from an anonymous attendee, is there a distinction between military and purely scientific utilization for your missions?
So I'll answer that briefly. In the States, there's a clear distinction between the two. In Europe, Israel, and many places, we consider a lot of these spacecrafts being dual use. BGU-SAT is not dual use, it's for scientific purposes. The same goes for the Venus mission. And Bereshit, I think that the military are not interested at the moment in flying to the moon. But obviously it feeds into our capabilities of being independent. So there's a clear connection between the two.
I would even say that, even in Bereshit, the reason we're able to build such a small spacecraft, because although it was a 585 kilos, it's still considered the smallest one that, was designed and reached the moon. And the reason we were able to do that is because the technologies that were developed for military purposes, we just use them for civilian purposes. So I think the reason Israel has amazing capabilities is because of military, but now it's being used for many other purposes.
So I'll also say a lot of the work we do in our lab, which is remote sensing, analyzing images, does also feed into defense-related projects, mainly homeland security. We're not offensive in any way, and we publish papers in the open literature. We've worked with the United States DoD, with AFRL, that's the Air Force Research Labs, but at the end of the day, we do science.
Very good. We're getting a question from Sandra Brodsky. She's asking, and I think maybe this could be for Shimrit or Dan Blumberg, give one example of something that you found out that wasn't expected and ended up being useful from a scientific perspective.
You want me to answer quickly and think of one, Shimrit?
Yeah,
So-
go ahead.
Okay, I'll give one that that I like giving. In one of our projects, we were flying a radar over fields in the Negev, and we had some very bizarre spikes in the data, which we considered as an error. And the student went to pick up equipment that we had in the field, came back, said, "Listen, you can't imagine that place where we had the spikes. There's a little leak in a water pipe. Turns out we can detect water leaks." That turned into a company built by our students, living in Omer, where Shimrit also lives. That company is now Utilus, and they have offices throughout the world where they detect water leaks from space for urban
Amazing.
environments.
All right, we'll give our last question because our time is almost up to Philip Gompertz, who many of you know, who recently retired from a great career at AABGU. He's asking, are there any plans for Israel to join the International Space Station?
Of course, we're already on our way there. Next year, we have Eitan Stiva, which is going to be a private mission, although very national driven. Just like Fear started off as a private mission and carried the whole country with him. So we have Eitan Stiva, the second Israeli astronaut to space. He's going to be flying next January with Exium, with three other astronauts that were announced last week during the Israeli Space Week. And he's going to conduct a lot of science and educational activities in space from the Ramon Foundation.
Very nice. Okay, at the prerogative of the moderator, we're just going to go a couple minutes because our audience is like, blowing up with questions here right at the end. So I think this one's for you, Shimrit. It's from Nina Rosner. She's asking, how do you help a country or a population when you see disaster images? Like, how does it actually work?
Well, I'm going to divide that to two. We have the emergency response that we developed algorithm for, and one of the challenges is that not necessarily during the disaster we have satellite coverage. Okay, so in order to do that, we have to find the best place that has the coverage, and sometimes it's even waking up people in the middle of the night and saying, "Gee, you have that image in your satellite. Could you operate that for me, or could you take a picture for me?" And then what we do is we apply our algorithms that are already pre-ready, because we do a lot of things freehand prior to the disaster, and then just apply it very rapidly in places like the DLR in Oberpfaffenhofen, which is just like a half an hour from Munich. So they're like real life doctors with beepers just for mapping. So once they have such a disaster, they're all bipped, coming down to the center and just mapping everything rapidly. The algorithm that we develop is based, and this is what we were recognized mostly by United Nations, is the involvement of taking optical images that we see, and just like our vision, and radar images, and combining the two in order to get a higher accuracy in the mapping process. So we not only want to send forces to where we can save people, But we also want to look at the images and say, okay, you could access the people using cars, and if not, we could also send choppers for that matter, because we could just by the satellite imagery response see if the roads are destroyed on the way to saving lives. So
Thank
there's
you
a lot
very
of.
much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Dan, you've got the last question, then we're going to close. This is coming from Raymond Schwaki. He's asking just if you could speak to the current state of the Israel's commercial space industry.
It's a really good question. Traditionally, all of space is done by huge companies. And in Israel, there's 3 big defense companies that do space research and are involved in the construction of satellites. That's the IAI, Israel Aerospace Industry, Elbit, and Rafael. But what is happening in Israel now is that there are many more small companies that are coming out of younger people coming out of the military with a background or coming out of those industries and building startups. And the next thing that's going to happen in April, there'll be a call in Israel to set up a facility for miniature satellite development that'll serve all of the industry in Israel. And we're going to compete in that tender. We want to build that in southern Israel, actually in Yerucham, together with the Technion, together with some of the bigger industries. And we hope on finding some international partners that will join us on that to get this industry to bloom in Israel, because we believe that we have the capability of doing something that will serve the rest of the world in nano satellites and small satellites. We have the experience and we have the manpower for that.
Thank you very much.
If I can
Go ahead,
also
Kfir.
share something, and just to continue what Dan said, so I hope you see this, okay? But this is a picture, the latest picture I saw of, the space ventures in Israel. Of course, Ben-Gurion University is also here. And I should also mention that Israel had the first exit, the first company, the space company that was sold, which is also interesting, Effective Space. So as Dan said, we are moving forward with pushing the civilian space industry in Israel, and it's happening.
I love that, and I love how that chart focused on the collaboration, the unique startup nation secret sauce of collaboration between academia, industry, the defense forces, startup, outside ventures, nonprofit. It's really great. So with that, let's try to bring this to a close. I just want to thank our panelists, Dan, Kfir, and Shimrit. This was a really interesting panel. We held our participant list really well throughout the whole period. For those who just can't get enough of our webinars, please tune in for the next one, #Webinar Wednesday on February the 17th, to learn more about Israel's success that we're all envious of with the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. We'll be having Professor Nadav Davidovich, the director of BGU's School of Public Health, tell us what everyone else can learn from Israel as it relates to vaccine distribution. And then also, for those of you who have not heard the word yet, we have an incredible event coming up on April the 25th. Please tune in. It's free to attend. We're calling it Celebrating the Remarkable. It's going to be a virtual event, a broadcast around the world, where Dr. Ruth K. Westheimer will be receiving her first honorary doctorate from an Israeli university. She's incredibly excited to be receiving this. She has raised money for a psychology endowment that she's going to bestow in her name at the university. We'll also be recognizing the incredible volunteer philanthropist Tony Young and Philip Gompertz, who I mentioned earlier, who stewarded the largest gift ever to the state of Israel from an incredibly generous family, the Marcus family. So with that, David Ben-Gurion, the founder and first prime minister of Israel, and the guy we are so lucky to have on the door, whose name is on the door of our university, once said that the Negev is a great Zionist asset. And that's true, David. But today we learned that space also is a Zionist asset. So thank you again, once again, to our panelists and for all of you joining us. Stay safe, be healthy.